King George III has a bigger dumpy than
your favorite state marshal and owner of slave syndicate. And before you ask, yes, I am Carthaginian. As promised, I am trying to put these videos out faster. Don't expect a regular upload schedule, but do not expect of me to become another Soviet Vombo. Anyway, with that out of the way, Black Moon Chronicles. A French comic book series made by a big fan of Gary Gygax, François Marcela Freudeval. If your Frenchies got a problem with my spelling, fuck you. A dark fantasy comic book series that's going strong even today. I personally love it, though I will admit the series itself could be done better in some ways. To give a quick summary, it's a dark comic book fantasy series centered around Wismerhill, a half-dark elf, a half-human knight, on his quest of slowly becoming God Emperor of mankind through fucking up, dying, and basically doing morally dubious things for the sake of doing good deeds. Just like Jimmy's Space. Anyway, the series is quite good. I recommend learning French if you want the whole series, cause for some reason Comic Issue 0, The Cruel Game, is not available in English, despite being practically made before the entire fucking Second Earth saga. But whatever. Also, there's the Mephraton series that is also just unavailable in English, but the price for it is So, I now may see you asking, what's the point of this video? Well, my dyslexic audience that cannot read the title, I'm going to compare it to the 1999 RTS adaptation Black Moon Chronicles. A game that I got introduced to as a child and spent most of my time playing. The game is basically the same as the comic books, with a lot of differences done to liberate itself from the comic book's continuity, since by 1999 the comic's 8th issue was released, with at least 6 more yet to come to conclude the main plot. This does not mean the story is bad, as being able to choose a side to join can help the player immerse himself more in the game. The problem comes from janky gameplay and the fact the game may be considered unfinished. I have no way of confirming this since there is not much known about the game. As far as I could find, the game did apparently well, and that's it. With how much time I spent playing it, I can confirm some things are either lacking or may not even be in the game, such as siege towers, which are supposedly in the game, yet you cannot recruit them, or how the only cavalry unit is called light cavalry, meaning there should be units like the heavy cavalry, though that idea was scrapped as there's not even a mention of such a thing in the bestiary, and the only available info is found when building, well, buildings in your castle. The video is not, however, gonna be a rant about the game. Instead, I will focus on what they got right and what they got wrong in their attempt at adapting the comic book series. Now here are some things I have to mention. 1. I will be a bit biased at places due to being a fan of the comic books. 2. I have not read Mephraton comics or the In a Cruel Game prequel comic, so I will not bring some points from those, despite them possibly being able to salvage some things. Also, I will only reference events that happen in the comic and the game. I will mention some comic book events if they are contradictory in some way to some paths in the game. Third, I will mostly focus on the canon path, that being the Black Moon campaign. If there is something noteworthy to be said from the other 3 campaigns, it will be mentioned. Fourth, spoilers. And with that out of the way, let's do this. The comic and the game start with the Emperor Hagendorf visiting the Oracle, as Hagendorf wishes to know his fate and the fate of his reign. This is somewhat faithfully recreated in the game's first cutscene, though some versions of the game don't have it, for some reason. Instead, some versions, like one on Steam, have scrolling text with main menu music. Though when you get to the main menu, you see parts of that cutscene for some reason. Actually, the explanation is that neither GOG or Steam can run them properly due to some scripting issues. In the comic, most of Wismerhill's tales are told through bodiless narrator, while in the game, same narrator is somewhat present, though he looks like a priest of the Order of Justice. The game makes different beginning of Wismerhill's tale. Originally in the first comic book, Wismerhill is an unskilled knight who meets Hazor Tails, or Pilfas in French, who becomes his friend, and together they become thieves and small-time bandits. In the game, Wismerhill is clad in the Dragon's Knight armor he got in the second comic, and does heroic deeds for the Imperial citizens, like fighting orcs and trolls, as well as recruit bandits to his side and make his own warband. Game skips most of Wismerhill's companions. Ones that are missing are Faye, Wismerhill's first love, Hazor Tails, his best friend, Pepete and Goom, magical twins, of whom Goom is a massive brawler due to a curse, and Pepete is the one who controls him. And Shambalo, the group's go-to guy when it comes to magic. Only ones present are Helainea, Wismerhill's second lover and murderer of Faye, Gorgor Bey, half-ogre, half-human bandit warlord, and Murata, stoic samurai whose ship got wrecked and he became a lone wanderer. Speaking of which, in the game, immediately after Wismerhill gets his own army, he joins Gorgor, because of being threatened to be killed by him. In the comic, Tails and Whis attempt to raid a village Gorgor has recently occupied, and are thrown into cages. Here, Tailsy trolls Gorgor. This resulted in Whis and Hazor Tails joining Gorgor, as Gorgor figured it takes guts to taunt him like that, knowing the risks and all. Next up is the Rocky Pass, where in the game, immediately, like the second Wismerhill joined Gorgor, Wismerhill is warned by the winds that there's an ambush party ready to kill Gorgor, so Whis warns Gorgor, and thus the ambushing party gets ambushed back, resulting in Whis becoming officer in Gorgor's army. In the comic, several days passed, between which Wismerhill falls in love with Faye, they fuck, and then Wismerhill and Gorgor get into some fights with random warlords. After days later, Whis warns Gorgor of the ambush, and after killing the ambushing party, Whis is made lieutenant. In the game, Order of Justice is immediately there to kill Gorgor and his bandit army, while in the comic, they meet after Gorgor's army took over city of Kendir. Also in the game, the castle Wismerhill takes over is not Kendir, but Garundel. Castle that Wismerhill seizes control of in the third comic. Due to this, many events are either skipped, ignored, or rearranged for the sake of other campaigns, basically the main ones. In the comic, Wismerhill does not really have a choice of joining any side, as he didn't meet Order of Justice before the events of Comic 5, Order of Light is rather antagonistic towards him, and with him is Gorgor Bey, who is notorious for killing and pillaging feudal lords of the Lin Empire. In the game, however, you can pick any side you want after you take over Garundel. This is somewhat stupid that you can choose your faction, because 1. At the beginning of the game, you fight orcs and trolls that carry the banners of the Black Moon, which implies you are actively ruining advances of the Black Moon warriors. This, however, is the most excusable, as you can either argue that they are deserters, some wild orcs or trolls, or Haziel is doing his scheming again, so he's willing to pardon you helping the Empire. 2. While you do help the Empire at the beginning, the fact you join Gorgor Bey, the notorious bandit warlord that he is, and then spend time killing Knights of Order of Light, should make you the enemy of the Empire by default. You are aiding an enemy of the Empire. Not to mention, Emperor Hagendorf, while being a badass, is a paranoid man who even back in the 4th comic says he uses prophets to find his supposed soon-to-be killer, and is extremely suspicious of anyone powerful. Heck, he even denies the right of having Order of Justice build their own fortresses within the Empire, cause he's afraid that Order of Justice will betray him just like the Order of Light did at the Battle of Zarot. 3. Neither in the game or the comic does Wismerhill meet Order of Justice until the Battle of Zarot. In the game, you meet them by joining them, but in the comic he meets Order of Justice once he fights for the Black Moon. He shouldn't even know Order of Justice exists by this point. Unless the narrator in the game is Wismerhill's guide, which gives more questions than answers. 4. Order of Light should pretty much regard you as either a filthy traitor or an enemy to be eliminated as soon as possible, cause you meet them as their enemy, kill their warriors and besiege their castle, which in the comic book is not theirs, but whatever. As I said, we will go with the Black Moon path, since this is the canon path Wismerhill takes in the comic. In the game, you join any one of the 4 main factions, so that you, the player, can fulfill Wismerhill's destiny. However, in the comic, after Wismerhill takes over the castle of Garundel, he is forced to let Haziel and his forces into the castle. During this, Wismerhill and Helainea teleport with Teal'c to a town, where apparently Wismerhill's father is, as Helainea overhears Haziel talking about him. Our group meets him in that city, and as soon as they wish to approach, Imperial troops come and attack him, eventually killing him before Wismerhill can save him. In the game, this mission is present as a special mission you can play, one of the special scenarios basically, except you, in that mission, can and have to save Wismerhill's father, because the game misunderstood the point of this event. This event was a ruse in the comic. Haziel has sent demons to transform into Imperial soldiers, and demon Urmacht took a form of Wismerhill's father, so that it looks like Emperor is absolute racist against elves. Though Wismerhill never questions how Emperor is willing to align with the elves later on, and Wismerhill then goes on murderous rampage through the Empire, until he eventually joins forces with Haziel. Keep in mind, the comic is not subtle about it. They reveal the very moment Wismerhill leaves town that every single one of them was a demon in disguise. Speaking of which, the first events in the game. Because of the path taken, our possible allies we can recruit are Murata and Helainea, despite the fact they should already be Wismerhill's friends. Both Helainea and Murata appear in the second comic. Murata, in the comic, he meets the group in Fainlock Hut, where he fights Goom for money, is almost pickpocketed by Teal'c, and then when an angry crowd attempts to take their money back that they lost in the arena on bets, Whis and the group help Murata, and Murata joins them as a sign of gratitude. In the game, there are numerous ways you can join your army, but in the Black Moon path, he is attacked by bandits, and after you save him, you can either accept him into your group or tell him to move along. Helainea is different. She starts off as a lover of a mad mage who wants to extend his life with an elven blood. She, however, is a manipulative bitch that does as Haziel orders her, and in a village she made with her fellow demons, She kills Faye and tries killing Wismerhill as well. But Wismerhill's power is so big, she falls in love with him and is just accepted into the group after a brief back and forth. And some fuck. In the game you meet her in the same city on all paths, although in Black Moon campaign you have to save her. While in the other campaigns she's an evil bitch that took over the city with mind control, though only in Justice campaign you have to kill her. And you cannot make her submit to you. Some other interesting notes to be made. On this map you are tasked with entering the Peaks of Wind. In the game they do the same as in the comic, except in the comic Wismerhill was naturally called to the peaks, for the winds have attached themselves to his mother and promised to protect Vis at all costs, although sometimes that promise feels as shallow as Minilad's personality. In the game there are enemies trying to take over the peak for some reason. It doesn't make sense because there's no reason for them to try to take over them. It's just a fucking rock with bunch of winds going around it. There's nothing special about it. In the game, as a Black Moon servant, you spend most of your time doing Haziel's work, gathering forces, marshalling the men and preparing for an assault on the Empire. In the comic, however, Wismerhill mostly just pillaged and destroyed imperial cities and castles until he decided to help Haziel kill Emperor Hagendorf. Like in the comic, he joins Haziel at the Battle of Tsaroth, while in the game you are practically carrying Black Moon banners everywhere before you are summoned to Tsaroth. In the game there are missions where you must go to the Oracle as well as visit the Dragon Princess. In the comic, Wismerhill did these two things on his own. The Dragon Princess, he was just passing through and he was then forced to duel a Dragon Knight from who he took the famous black and yellow armor after besting him. In the game you are trying to weaken the Order of Light, which made a pact with the Dragon Princess. In the comic, Oracle was exactly why Wismerhill was going through the Dragon's Lands, as he wanted to know his fate and where his father is. Wismerhill's first wizard friend, Hizin, actually tells him to go to the Oracle if he wants further answers about his destiny. And before you ask, I don't count him as a member of Wismerhill's group, as he is only present in one comic, and it mostly comes down to him being a mentor and a reluctable ally to Gorgor. Something that I will just casually mention, although it's unimportant, but Wismerhill pays a stop to a local dwarf craftsman and orders weapons. In the game, it's so that for the Battle of Tsaroth's Fall, you can have better weapons, but in the comic he did it because he just wanted, in general, to be better prepared for any battles. Now the Battle of Tsaroth. Before you ask, I am skipping a lot of the battles and events because either they don't happen in the comic or are not important really. Again, back to the Tsaroth. In the game they did recreate it somewhat faithfully, although there are two gripes I have with it. 1. Black Moon is supposed to fail in the comic, as Haziel knows that any victory achieved here would mean defeat in the war, since Emperor would actually garner much higher support, even from his enemies and rivals, and even a traitor like Fratus Sinister, Grandmaster of the Order of Light, who would then take it seriously that Black Moon is actually invading the Empire. Wismerhill doesn't do anything in this battle as he realizes how futile the fight is, and after the battle ends, he attempts to usurp the entire Murk barony with his own army as well as the surviving soldiers from the battle. In the game, however, you can pretty much decimate the entire army of Empire, Light and Justice at the same time, and yet still be counted as a loss, no matter if Haziel supposedly dies or not. Personally, I feel cheated, cause I fucking won that battle, and I'm ready for some challenges. But no, We're following the comic for once, even though it doesn't make sense, as I have given myself enough money to fund the entire American military-industrial complex for the next 100 years of constant warfare, and thus managed to score entire 12 battalions of necromancers and giants. 2. Empire and Justice take the offensive, while Black Moon stands defensive in the comic. In the game the roles were reversed, as Black Moon just does a frontal assault and is extremely strong, so when you play as either Empire or Justice, you will suffer a lot through this mission, hating everything about it. Worse yet, if Emperor falls, you will lose money and have to restart the entire fucking mission. By the way, of all of the commanders in the game, he is the only commander that does it, as any other commander will just die and either not be brought back to life or just cause a game over. Order of Light will do its own thing even if you play as them. Hell, as Light, it's probably the easiest one battle, as all you need to do is just let the other 3 factions fight it out and then attack and kill Haziel. Otherwise it's rather fateful, although for some reason, as Order of Light you can join the battle and suffer no repercussions from Fratus, and yet still be branded as a traitor to the Emperor. You see, in the comic, Fratus refused to help the Emperor on purpose, and worse yet, killed any messenger that was sent to him before they could tell him to move his ass into the battle. Anyway, as previously mentioned, Black Moon loses no matter what you do. We will still march to Murk, although in the game it's to protect it from the Empire, while in the comic it was just to usurp the entire barony. You see, what happened was Black Moon forces marched into the city, and Wismerhill, now the supreme commander of Black Moon warriors, by the virtue of being the last one alive, attempts to usurp it by killing the head baron and looking for the crown, only to discover Greldinard, Haziel's right-hand man, and Haziel Thorn, both still alive and kicking. When Wismerhill questions how they survived, they explain their plans, and Wismerhill then has to suck up to Haziel to avoid being eradicated. Haziel, seeing potential in this, agrees to Wismerhill's suggestions of power. Haziel is kind of a dick. In the game, you attack Murk that was taken over by the Empire, find out Haziel is still alive, and then go and take over the county of Horker as well. After that we diverge from the comic extremely for a while. In the comic, Wismerhill, now crowned the Baron of Murk, rebuilds the war-torn Murk and its army, turns it into a prospering province, and then usurps a neighboring fiefdom, whose count was supposed to take Murk as his reward for aiding the Emperor at Sarot Fall. This pleases Haziel with Wismerhill's ingenuity and angers Emperor with this act of resistance. Wismerhill then goes to Lynn as a messenger, with Helanea and Tailsy transformed into these cool-looking messengers, claiming that Wismerhill is making himself a puppet of the Emperor just to buy time for the barony to expand its forces. In Lynn, he meets Metraton, a powerful archmage who is as powerful as a god, yet he claims to not be one, as gods have killed his master, and he is on a warpath to avenge him. Here are other events that happen in the comic, which lead up basically to the same ending as the game. 1. Wismerhill dies and is resurrected so that he may use spells of the Black Moon and become its priest. 2. Order of Light openly rebel against the Emperor and with the aid of Dragon Princess besiege Northind, causing Emperor to briefly turn his attention away from Murk. 3. Wismerhill attacks an undead archmage in order to find more money to build up the army and economy, and looked for some magical items and weapons. During this time, Gorgor died and was resurrected, because death means nothing. Because this is Dragon Ball now. 4. Parsifal, Grandmaster of the Order of Justice, besieged Altenberg and with his divine mind and soul convinced the head priest to cause a march of ideas and make the Knights of Light rebel against their corrupt grandmasters. With this, these two orders officially unite and become the singular Order of Justice. Fratus doesn't care much as he's still got a strong army or isn't aware of this event. However, Parsifal's priests summon an archangel who then speaks to the mind of the uncorrupted and pure Knights of Light who were only misguided by Fratus's crusade for power, which makes them quietly leave Fratus in the middle of the night and join up with Parsifal. Dragon Prince wounds Fratus in anger and leaves Fratus to be killed by the Emperor. Fratus is thus forced to flee east, where he then pleads allegiance to Wismerhill and becomes his puppet. 5. Parsifal approaches Emperor again about the idea of expanding the Order of Justice's influence, but Emperor still refuses, like he did at Sarot, fearing that Parsifal's successor would either betray him or the next Emperor, just like Fratus did. Thus Parsifal doesn't do anything for the Empire after that. 6. Wismerhill gets new war machines, Geraldinard becomes Orc King, and both Vis and Grell amass a massive new army. During this, Wismerhill impregnates 9 women and Helanea, so that he may have children, as he was told by Hazil to become Lord Prince of Negation, and with that he would sacrifice his humanity and get more power. And by sacrificing his humanity, I mean he cannot have kids anymore and gets a new cool getup. 7. Wismerhill gets the Frags as his allies, and with their help and the armies of the Black Moon, he conquers Lyn and takes over the entire empire. He is killed by the Emperor, yet the Emperor dies from the wounds Wismerhill had caused him. Then Wismerhill gets resurrected by Hazil and destroys 10 commandments, dooming the entire world in the process. This also causes Sizik, land of the Order of Justice, and all the pure people to just evaporate from the existence and basically live in heaven. After that, Wismerhill becomes the new Emperor, and events from the comic that aren't in the game play out, i.e. the comics 12 to whenever the series ends. Do you think I dumped a lot of info on you? Don't worry, cause the game only slightly touches any of this. First off, Wismerhill cannot ever die, so they just skip his ritualistic deaths. Anyway, after beating Murk, you immediately go for Altenberg, open a demonic portal just like in the 10th comic, which means practically jack shit in the game. Then you go and single-handedly conquer all the lands of the Order of Light. After you take over Altesberg, Fratus surrenders himself to you, and you can either spare him or kill him. It's kinda stupid, considering he dies anyway during the battle, and you will need 1000 gold coins to revive him, but who cares. If you accept his offer, you only get additional hero. You don't get his soldiers, you get only him. After that you attack the province of Lyn, where you mostly fight Imperial soldiers, but it seems like the Emperor actually grew desperate enough to agree with Parsifal on his deal about fortresses, since you end up fighting and besieging castles of justice. After that comes the siege of Lyn, and once you kill the Emperor and take over the inner palace, Hazil gloats over his victory, and you would get this cutscene. But Steam and GOG versions are broken, so no, you don't get anything. Anyway, in the cutscene, Wismerhill attacks the Emperor and kills him, and thus becomes the Emperor himself. And that's the campaign. Now let's talk units, designs and characters. Empire. Quite faithful with its roster, priests seemingly looking like the ones from the Oracle part, and soldiers seem to generally resemble more the Olivier Ledroit design, with armors being on the style of Lorica Musculata. Only things noteworthy are the mages, as I can't find any mage that looks like that, and the general's armor, which, while I know what inspired it, I hope, is a bit weird and I've never seen anyone really wear it. My other gripe will be the fact that the Emperor never wears any of his armors we see in the comic. Yes, I know this was 1999 and only 8th comic was released, but the fact Emperor never wears anything when going to combat pisses me off. Plus we do see him in the armor as far back as comic 4. Justice. Well, this one's quite faithful too, not gonna lie. Somewhat. Aside cavalry, paladins and Parsifal, they all look reimagined. Priests look semi-fine, since it makes sense. Archangels in the comic looked more Greek than mechanical, although that may be because of this artwork that I'm mistaking it with. We never saw any Archer of Justice, and the Phalanx just doesn't exist as they're just paladins. Almost every Soldier of Justice looks like the paladins. Mages are the biggest question, as we never see Justice use anything else aside priests and warriors. Light. Funny enough, these ones are pretty much like the comic except for the archers. Sure, some units are repurposed like the mage and priest, but still they're, funny enough, close to the original. Only two things are noteworthy. One is that I don't think anyone else aside Master Gunther wore this armor, and two, Order of Light had crossbowmen. Black Moon. Ignoring the fact their orcs are absolutely pathetic, they are somewhat consistent as their strength comes from using undead and demons. What's worth mentioning is that the orcs never really wore any armor of Black Moon, as they weren't the frontline infantry. They were only the auxiliary force recruited by Greldinard into his own army. Black Moon's cavalry is also more based on the Black Guard, who were elite soldiers given to Wismerhill, rather than basic cavalry of the Black Moon. Aside that, Sherolls somewhat got more muscular, while Giants got more fat. Although Giants were a mixed bag anyway when it comes to their guts. Necromancers I don't think were ever seen looking like that, as most magic was done by Mentats, who are priests in the game. I think the Necromancer's design was taken from this guy, but that's just me. Greldinard is cool as ever. Lords of Negation have just weird art that made me think they are the old types of pen that you need to dip ink in. I must point out, a small side note, knowing that Greldinard is an half-orc, it makes his voice lines come off weird, since he sounds extremely human compared to the orcs.
Attack in the name of the Black Moon!
By the way, I will not really talk sound design much, since the English voice lines are badass and even make the battles more epic. The only issue I have with it is how the characters are mostly voiced by one guy, who funny enough voices Rayman in the Rayman games.
Knowing what a scaredy cat he is, he's probably hiding someplace.
Combat fatigues! That's exactly what we need! You're right!
Why not?
At your service, sire.
For our lord.
To war in the name of justice!
Crush the insects!
Elves. Funny enough, only ants are actually accurate to the comic. The rest of them is rather made up, as their design mostly reflects heads or tails, or Pazuzu in his dark elf form, rather than the wood elves we see in the comic. Dwarves. Again, really weird how this time the turtles, aka their big units, are actually of the character, as dwarves pride themselves with their massive war machines, rather than large tortoises. Still fucking cool though, not gonna lie. Undead. The thing is, aside the undead Leviathan and the vampires, we actually saw most of the undead, even the Magio Lich, although it's quite debatable as to who and when. Undead Leviathan is fucking badass. He's cool, I love him, wish we got one in the comic. Demons. This one is the most disappointing. Balgator, obviously, reflects the design of Urmacht, yet nothing else, as his name does not seem to appear anywhere in the comic. Also the fact he's a named demon, yet is used as a main big flying demon, comes off even sadder, as it means this unique demon is worth nothing more than a flying soldier for the Black Moon. Succubus is just reskinned Hellanea, although her red outfit fits the character of Hellanea more than the green she wears. Imps never appeared that way ever in the comic. Neutral. Dragons are fine, although in the comic there were more designs of the dragons. We never see wild leviathans in the comic, but let's be real, we can guess there are some wild leviathans. The elementals never really looked like they do in the game, aside air elementals who guide Wismerhill. The fact some factions can only summon some of them also makes less sense, since we get to see only two factions use wizards in the comic, Empire and Black Moon. Also, a small side note, the mages of Light and Justice are fucking useless. They can only summon Water Elemental and Fire Elemental. And Fire Elementals can only be summoned when there's fire somewhere, and Water Elementals can only be summoned in water levels. And trust me, in the game that's really rare to see. The peasants are fine, just generic. But that's not the game's problem, we don't really get to see much of the populace in the Empire to compare it to. Obviously they don't look like anything from the comic, but who cares really, they're just peasants from medieval fantasy. And that's basically what Black Moon Chronicles is. Ballistas and catapults are fine, they look mostly like in the comic. Siege towers aren't in the game, yet they appear in the bestiary for some reason. Pigs are pigs. I don't know what you want from me, I didn't find an uncooked pig in the comic anyway. One unit that is in the game but does not appear in the bestiary are the bandits. Which doesn't make sense, even more so cause unlike the siege towers, they are in the game. Wismerhill and his group. Wismerhill looks fine, although it's weird he already starts off with his Dragon Knight armor that he steals, instead of his half plate armor, half scale, that I find more appealing. He also appears horseless despite the ending featuring him being on horseback, as well as the in-game cutscenes. One thing I will complain about is how he is useless in the game. In the comic, he learned thousands of powerful spells, was a talented commander and a trickster, and most importantly, died 4 times throughout the comic. In the game, once he dies, game is over. You have to load up a previous file. Gorgor, while not riding any of his beasts, is still the same kind of badass as ever, and even the strongest of the group. This attack is also inspired by his left hand right hand game he plays with people that really piss him off. Hellanea is just a reskinned succubus that also uses their voice lines. Murata somehow took over heads or tails' role as Wismerhill's personal friend, despite them being more of a commander and subordinate with cordial feelings for one another. He is still better than Wismerhill as a unit since he is, well, stronger swordsman. If I'm to say something, his design is okay. Although that may be just me, since when I saw his samurai armor, I just started liking that one more than his kimono. Now, for a lightning round of what units are missing from the game that we see in the comic. Empire, the Imperial Knights, these Mohawk soldiers, these Triceratops looking beasts, and custom units serving these feudal imperial lords, although I understand why they weren't included in the game. Justice. Not really anyone, maybe just the Order of Light units, but that doesn't count. Light. Chariot warriors, since only Fratus Sinister rides any chariot into battle. Black Moon. Oh boy. Actual human soldiers. Knights of the Black Moon. Giants with weapons and armors. These weird ogres. Black Guard that isn't light cavalry. These weird guards, although they are just reskinned Keldinard. Phalanx soldiers. These guards. Cultists with weapons. Dwarves. Aside maybe the tanks, not much since they don't really use any of their war machines they make in any battle during the entire comics runtime. Elves. Actual wood elves. And some creatures seen here. Undead. Undead titans. Disprints. Undead dragons. Demons. There is too much to mention, so let me just weirdly post a comic, pick your favorite. Neutral. Maybe these dinosaurs, but untamed. More citizens. These mercs. The bloody siege towers for once. Trebuchets. Other bullshit siege weapons. Zorax. The comic books N-word. Some of these side characters. And these kinds of bandit warriors. Wismerhill and his group. Faye, or Freydevalla, Wismerhill's first love, Goom and Pepet, Hezertails, and Shambalo. And some factions that are left out in general. Imperial Lords, this weird kingdom, Black Moon Order of Justice, Barbarian Tribes, Free Orcs and other monsters, all these civilizations. And with that, that's all there is to say about this game and the awesome comic book series. More videos will come, so stay prepared. Thank you all, and have a great day. And remember,
To war, my lords!